In the glittering world of the ultra-rich, where fortunes are forged and empires are built, shadows often lurk behind the opulent facades. We are told that money can't buy happiness, but can it buy something far more sinister? Can it purchase the ultimate betrayal? Tonight, we delve into a story that peels back the veneer of a picture-perfect life to reveal a heart of pure darkness. A tale of love, deception, and a $10 billion fortune that led to a shocking act of violence. This is the dark truth of the 10 billion insurance fortune wife shockingly murdered her own husband. Before we unravel this chilling narrative, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, so you don't miss our weekly explorations into the darkest corners of the human psyche. Now, settle in as we journey into a world where greed knows no bounds. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling estate of the Beaumont family, glinting off the pristine surface of the Olympic-sized swimming pool and illuminating the meticulously manicured gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. From the outside, it was a portrait of idyllic perfection, a testament to the immense wealth and success of its occupants, Richard and Eleanor Beaumont. Richard, a titan of the tech industry, had built his empire from the ground up, his innovative genius and relentless drive earning him a place among the world's wealthiest individuals. He was a man of sharp intellect and even sharper business acumen, his name synonymous with success. Eleanor, his wife of 15 years, was the epitome of grace and elegance. A former art curator with a discerning eye and a quiet strength, she was the perfect counterpart to Richard's dynamic energy. Together, they were the golden couple, their lives a seemingly endless waltz of lavish parties, exotic travels, and philanthropic endeavors. Their love story was one for the ages, or so it seemed. They had met at a charity gala, a chance encounter that blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Richard was captivated by Eleanor's intelligence and quiet confidence, while she was drawn to his ambition and unwavering belief in her. They were inseparable, their bond a source of envy for many in their elite social circle. But behind the gilded doors of their palatial home, a different story was unfolding, a narrative of quiet desperation and simmering resentment. For all their outward appearances of a blissful union, a chasm had been growing between them for years, a silent, insidious cancer eating away at the foundations of their marriage. Richard, consumed by his work, had become increasingly distant, his once adoring gaze now often lost in the blue glow of his phone screen, his mind perpetually occupied with stock prices and quarterly reports. The passionate conversations that had once defined their relationship had dwindled to perfunctory exchanges about their schedules and the running of their vast household. Eleanor, in turn, felt like a beautiful ornament in her husband's gilded cage. She had given up her promising career to become the perfect corporate wife, a role she had initially embraced but now found suffocating. The endless rounds of social obligations and charity work felt hollow and meaningless, a constant reminder of the intellectual stimulation she had sacrificed. She yearned for the days when they were a team, partners in every sense of the word, but that version of their life had long since faded into a distant memory. The $10 billion life insurance policy was Richard's idea, a pragmatic, if somewhat morbid, gesture to ensure Eleanor's financial security in the event of his untimely demise. He had presented it to her on their 15th anniversary, a testament, he had said, to his enduring love and commitment. Eleanor had signed the papers with a forced smile, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The sheer magnitude of the sum was staggering, a figure so vast it seemed almost abstract. But in the quiet moments that followed, a seed of a different kind of thought began to take root in the fertile ground of her discontent. The idea, at first, was a fleeting, intrusive whisper, a dark fantasy that she quickly pushed away, horrified by her own capacity for such a thought. But as the days bled into weeks and the weeks into months, the whisper grew louder, more insistent. The chasm between her and Richard widened, their interactions becoming increasingly strained and punctuated by a cold, unspoken tension. The final, irrevocable crack in the facade of their perfect marriage came during a heated argument one evening. Richard, in a moment of frustration, had uttered words that would forever echo in Eleanor's mind. "You have everything you could ever want," he had sneered. his voice laced with a cruel indifference. A beautiful home, a limitless bank account. What more could you possibly desire? His words had struck a raw nerve, a brutal confirmation of her deepest fears. He saw her not as a partner, but as a possession, another acquisition in his vast portfolio of wealth. The love she had once cherished had been replaced by a cold, transactional arrangement. In that moment, the whisper in her mind became a roar, the dark fantasy solidifying into a chillingly plausible plan. The plan was meticulous, born of a mind that had once curated priceless works of art. Eleanor spent weeks researching, her days consumed by a macabre new project. She delved into the world of untraceable poisons, her nights spent studying their effects, their telltale signs, and, most importantly, how to administer them without leaving a trace. She learned about the subtle nuances of a staged accident, the art of creating a scene that would fool even the most seasoned investigators. The chosen method was a rare, potent neurotoxin, a substance that mimicked the symptoms of a sudden, massive heart attack. It was difficult to procure, but Eleanor, with her resourcefulness and connections, managed to acquire a small, lethal dose. The delivery system was equally ingenious, a specially designed capsule that would dissolve in liquid, leaving no residue. The opportunity presented itself on a quiet Tuesday evening. Richard, as was his custom, was working late in his study, a glass of his favorite single malt scotch by his side. Eleanor, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, prepared his drink, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly as she dropped the tiny capsule into the amber liquid. She watched him from the doorway, a silent, unseen specter of his impending doom. He took a sip, then another, his eyes never leaving the screen of his laptop. For a moment, a wave of doubt and revulsion washed over her. This was the man she had once loved, the father of their 2 children, who were away at boarding school. But the image of his dismissive, sneering face flashed in her mind, and the flicker of remorse was extinguished, replaced by a cold, resolute determination. The poison worked swiftly. Richard's hand went to his chest, a look of confusion and alarm contorting his features. He gasped for air, his body convulsing as the neurotoxin wreaked its havoc on his nervous system. He collapsed to the floor, his life extinguished in a matter of moments. Eleanor waited, her breath held in a silent, agonizing suspense. When she was certain he was gone, she moved with a chilling composure. She carefully disposed of the remaining poison, her movements precise and methodical. She then called for an ambulance, her voice a mask of feigned hysteria and grief. To the outside world, Richard Beaumont, the visionary tech mogul, had died of a sudden, tragic heart attack, a victim of his high-stress lifestyle. The initial investigation confirmed this, the coroner's report citing cardiac arrest as the cause of death. Eleanor played the part of the grieving widow to perfection, her public displays of sorrow a masterpiece of deception. But as the initial shock subsided and the $10 billion insurance payout loomed, whispers of suspicion began to circulate. A fortune of that magnitude had a way of attracting scrutiny, of casting long, dark shadows on even the most carefully constructed facade. And in the heart of this gilded cage, a dark truth lay waiting to be unearthed, a truth that would shatter the illusion of a perfect life and expose the terrifying depths of a woman's greed and betrayal. The first chapter of this chilling saga had come to a close, but the story of the Beaumont fortune was far from over. A tenacious detective, a man with a reputation for seeing through even the most elaborate lies, was about to take an interest in the case, and he was not a man to be easily fooled. The game, as Eleanor would soon discover, had only just begun. Detective Miles Corbin was a man who thrived on puzzles. In his 2 decades with the Homicide Division, he had seen the very worst of humanity, the intricate webs of deceit that people spun to conceal their darkest secrets. He had a sixth sense for inconsistencies, for the subtle, jarring notes in a story that hinted at a deeper, more sinister truth. The case of Richard Beaumont, the billionaire who had seemingly dropped dead from a heart attack, was one such puzzle, a symphony of perfection that played just a little too out of tune for Corbin's liking. It was the insurance policy that had first piqued his interest. $10 billion was a staggering sum, a motive that screamed from the pages of the case file. But it was more than just the money. It was the wife, Eleanor Beaumont. Corbin had seen his fair share of grieving widows, their sorrow a raw, palpable thing. But Eleanor's grief, while expertly performed for the public, struck him as hollow, a carefully constructed facade. There was a coolness in her eyes, a composure that seemed almost unnatural for a woman who had just lost the love of her life. Corbin began his investigation by revisiting the scene of the crime, the opulent study where Richard Beaumont had drawn his last breath. The room had been meticulously cleaned, but Corbin was looking for something less tangible than physical evidence. He was searching for the ghost of what had happened, the emotional residue of a life cut short. He sat in Richard's chair, trying to see the world through the dead man's eyes. He noted the half-empty glass of scotch on the desk, the open laptop displaying a complex algorithm. Everything was in its place, a picture of a man at work, a man who had no idea that his life was about to end. His next stop was the coroner's office. Dr. Evans, a seasoned medical examiner with a weary, seen-it-all demeanor, confirmed the initial findings. Massive coronary artery thrombosis, he said, tapping a file on his desk. The man was a walking time bomb. High-stress job, long hours. It was bound to happen sooner or later. But Corbin was a man who questioned everything, and he pressed for more. "Did you run a full toxicology screen?" he asked, his gaze steady. Dr. Evans sighed, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "We ran the standard panel. No signs of any common poisons or narcotics." "But what about the uncommon ones?" Corbin persisted. "The ones that mimic the symptoms of a heart attack?" The medical examiner hesitated for a moment, then conceded. "There are a few, but they're incredibly rare and difficult to detect without a specific test. We'd have no reason to suspect foul play based on the initial examination." Corbin left the coroner's office with a nagging feeling of unease. He knew he was treading on thin ice, questioning the official cause of death of a man of Richard Beaumont's stature. But his instincts, which had rarely failed him, were screaming that something was wrong. He decided to dig deeper into the Beaumonts' lives, to peel back the layers of their carefully curated public image. He interviewed their staff, their friends, their business associates. A picture began to emerge, not of a perfect, loving couple, but of a marriage that was slowly, inexorably falling apart. The household staff spoke of a palpable tension in the house, of hushed arguments and long, silent dinners. A former personal assistant of Richard's revealed that he had been confiding in her about his marital problems, about his feeling that Eleanor was growing increasingly distant and resentful. A close friend of Eleanor's, a woman named Clara, provided another crucial piece of the puzzle. Over a cup of tea in a quiet cafe, Clara, her voice low and hesitant, spoke of Eleanor's growing unhappiness, her sense of being trapped in a life that no longer fulfilled her. She mentioned Eleanor's renewed interest in her old passion, art, and her frustration at having to put her own ambitions on hold for her husband's career. But it was a seemingly insignificant detail that truly set Corbin on the right path. During an interview with the Beaumont's gardener, an elderly man with a weathered face and a quiet, observant nature, he learned something that sent a chill down his spine. The gardener mentioned that in the weeks leading up to Richard's death, Eleanor had developed a keen interest in his collection of rare and exotic plants, particularly those with medicinal, or in some cases, toxic properties. He recalled a specific conversation about a plant known as the Whispering Death, a rare flower whose nectar, when properly extracted and concentrated, could induce a fatal cardiac arrest, leaving behind no trace in the body. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. The unhappy wife, the massive insurance payout, the interest in deadly toxins. It was a classic, albeit incredibly sophisticated, murder plot. But Corbin knew that having a theory was one thing. Proving it was another matter entirely. He needed concrete evidence, something that would link Eleanor directly to the poison. He obtained a warrant to search the Beaumont estate again, this time with a team of forensic experts. They scoured the property, from the meticulously organized library to the sprawling gardens. The breakthrough came in a place Corbin had least expected it: Eleanor's private art studio. Tucked away behind a large canvas, in a small, locked cabinet, they found what they were looking for. A collection of books on toxicology, a small, sophisticated chemistry set, and, most damningly, a vial containing a minuscule amount of a clear, viscous liquid. Corbin sent the vial to a specialized lab for analysis. The results came back a few days later, confirming his worst fears. The liquid was a highly concentrated form of the neurotoxin derived from the whispering death flower, a poison so rare and potent that it was almost untraceable. Armed with this new evidence, Corbin brought Eleanor in for questioning. She arrived at the police station with her high-priced lawyer, her expression a mask of cool indifference. She denied everything, of course, her voice steady and unwavering. She claimed the books were for research for a novel she was writing, the chemistry set a long-forgotten hobby. The vial of poison, she insisted, must have been planted. But Corbin was relentless. He presented her with the evidence, one piece at a time, slowly, methodically, chipping away at her carefully constructed wall of lies. He spoke of her unhappy marriage, her resentment towards her husband, her interest in deadly plants. He watched her closely, looking for a flicker of fear, a crack in her composure. The interrogation stretched for hours, a tense, psychological battle of wills. Eleanor held her ground, her resolve seemingly unbreakable. But as the weight of the evidence against her mounted, a single, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand betrayed the fear that was churning beneath her icy exterior. Corbin knew he was close. He had unraveled the thread of her deception, and it was only a matter of time before the entire tapestry of her lies came undone. He had one more card to play, one final piece of the puzzle that he hoped would shatter her composure and force her to confess. He had discovered something about the $10 billion insurance policy, a detail that Eleanor had clearly overlooked, a detail that would turn her grand, murderous scheme into a spectacular failure. The second act of this dark drama was drawing to a close, and the stage was set for a final, explosive confrontation. Eleanor Beaumont, the grieving widow, the calculating killer, was about to discover that she had made one fatal mistake. The air in the interrogation room was thick with unspoken tension. Eleanor Beaumont, her face a pale, impassive mask, sat opposite Detective Corbin, her lawyer a silent, watchful presence by her side. The evidence against her was overwhelming, a tightening noose of her own making. Yet, she remained resolute, her denial a fortress of ice. Corbin, however, was a patient man. He had seen this before, the desperate, last-ditch stand of a cornered predator. He knew that even the most formidable walls could be brought down with the right amount of pressure, the right key to unlock the hidden fears and vulnerabilities. And he believed he had found that key. "We know about the poison, Eleanor," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "We know about your research, your interest in the whispering death flower. We have the vial from your studio. It's over." Eleanor's lawyer cleared his throat, a signal for her to remain silent. But a flicker of something, a fleeting shadow of unease, crossed her face. Corbin pressed on, his gaze unwavering. "You thought you had committed the perfect crime. A silent, untraceable poison, a grieving widow, a $10 billion payout. It was a brilliant plan, I'll give you that. But you overlooked one crucial detail, one small, but fatal, flaw in your grand design." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air, a heavy, suffocating weight. Eleanor's composure, for the first time, began to crack. A faint line of perspiration appeared on her upper lip. "The insurance policy," Corbin said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You were so focused on the $10 billion, so blinded by your greed, that you failed to read the fine print." He slid a document across the table, a copy of the life insurance policy Richard Beaumont had taken out. He had a single clause highlighted in yellow. "It's called the Slayer Statute," Corbin explained, his voice laced with a cold, triumphant satisfaction. "A standard clause in most life insurance policies. It states, in no uncertain terms, that a beneficiary who is found guilty of intentionally causing the death of the insured is not entitled to receive any of the death benefits." Eleanor's eyes widened in disbelief, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. She snatched the document, her hands trembling as she read the highlighted clause. The words swam before her eyes, a cruel, mocking testament to her monumental oversight. "The money," Corbin continued, his voice a relentless hammer blow to her crumbling defenses, "will not go to you. It will be passed on to the contingent beneficiaries, your 2 children. You will not see a single cent of it." A strangled cry escaped Eleanor's lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and despair. The $10 billion, the prize for which she had sacrificed her husband, her freedom, her very soul, was now forever beyond her reach. The gilded cage she had so desperately sought to escape had become a real one, its bars forged not of gold, but of her own insatiable greed. The confession that followed was a torrent of pent-up bitterness and resentment. The years of feeling invisible, of being a mere accessory to her husband's success, had festered into a deep, abiding hatred. The $10 billion had not been just about the money. It had been about power, about taking back control of her life, about proving that she was more than just Richard Beaumont's beautiful, decorative wife. She recounted the meticulous planning, the weeks of research, the cold, calculating precision with which she had executed her husband's murder. There was no remorse in her voice, only a chilling, self-serving justification for her actions. She had believed herself to be a master puppeteer, pulling the strings of a grand, elaborate play. But in the end, she was just another victim of her own destructive ambition. The trial of Eleanor Beaumont was a media sensation, a lurid, real-life soap opera that captivated the nation. The beautiful, elegant socialite, the grieving widow, was unmasked as a cold-blooded killer, her perfect life a carefully constructed lie. The evidence against her was irrefutable, her confession a damning indictment of her own character. The jury's verdict was swift and unanimous, guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Eleanor showed no emotion, her face a blank, empty canvas. The woman who had once graced the covers of magazines and been the toast of high society was now just another inmate, her future a bleak, endless expanse of concrete and steel. The $10 billion fortune, the catalyst for this tragic tale of greed and betrayal, was placed in a trust for her 2 children, a heavy, blood-soaked inheritance. The Beaumont estate, once a symbol of success and happiness, was sold, its opulent rooms now silent, haunted by the ghosts of a shattered family. Detective Miles Corbin, the man who had unraveled the thread of Eleanor's deception, closed the case file with a sense of weary satisfaction. He had brought a killer to justice, but there was no real victory in a story with so many victims. A man was dead, a family destroyed, and 2 children were left to grapple with the horrific truth of their mother's actions. The dark truth of the $10 billion insurance fortune had been revealed, a cautionary tale of the corrosive power of greed and the terrifying lengths to which a human heart, consumed by darkness, can go. The gilded cage had been shattered, its beautiful, deadly occupant now confined to a prison of her own making, a stark and chilling reminder that some fortunes come at a price that is far too high to pay.